What's going on, everybody? We are back with another edition of the On the Ball podcast. It's been a couple weeks since we've been on. Our schedule's kind of not lining up, but tonight we're able to get myself, Brett, on, and we're gonna obviously discuss NBA Finals. Like that's clearly the biggest thing going on in the sports world right now. So we'll kind of deep dive into what happened, what the teams have to do. How do we? How does Dallas get back there? What does it mean for the Celtics moving forward? So definitely have an interesting conversation with this. And obviously, look, you guys know Brett from his other shows. He's well tapped into NBA and all that. So I feel like we'll definitely have a good conversation tonight. So before we get into anything, Brett, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm looking forward to being on the show tonight. I'm excited to talk about all the important things. I'm sure we'll talk about LeBron unfollowing Kendrick Perkins on Twitter. You know, the real news. But I'm looking forward to talking the finals.
Yeah. That Kendrick Perkins LeBron thing is kind of hilarious.
It really is. I don't know how they turned that into a full 10-minute segment. That is the most mind-boggling thing. Like, who wants to listen to that?
I have no idea. The way sports media and everything's going, it's you just never know what's going to make a story. I mean, Draymond's talking about Clay unfollowing the Warriors. It's like it's a whole thing now. If somebody says something you don't like, unfollow them. You got a team, maybe your future's up in the air, unfollow them. That's how we do it now. That's how you voice your displeasure. Apparently, you just
Right?
unfollow them. But all right, so I know what you said about LeBron and Perk. Obviously, that's between those two. Perk can say some crazy things. I will say he went through like a 2 day stretch where he was making a lot of sense, and I didn't know what was going on in the world anymore. Like he had a really good point. I feel like on the LeBron thing, I felt like it was a point that you could argue. He had like a really good point on I think WNBA and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, maybe Perk's turned the corner, and Perk did Perk things. But looking at the finals, that's our main reason for being here. Celtics win the series 4-1, take down the Dallas Mavericks, who what Vegas had like an 80% of the money was going towards Dallas. We saw a lot of analysts pick Dallas to win the series. I know Nick Wright picked Dallas in 5. It's Nick Wright. I mean, he was at one of the games, so he clearly had a rooting interest. The first question is going to be like, why do you think this Celtics team was, I don't know, undervalued, underrated, whatever word you want to use? Like, why were so many people trying to pick Dallas in this series? Looking at the way that it went, what do you think it was?
I think there's a couple reasons for that. Number one is I think people completely look too far into factors that were out of the Celtics' control when they were talking well, they weren't challenges in the East. Like, okay, well, that really isn't the Celtics' fault. Like, it's not their fault that the Hallie and D Mitch and everybody got hurt. So there's nothing they can do about that. They handled business like they were supposed to. But I think the bigger reason is, and we'll mention this guy a couple of times, but Jason Tatum.
Yep.
People have this weird obsession. Like at this point, it's almost like a cult to hate on Jason Tatum and to completely undervalue him. And in turn, that almost trickles down to the rest of the Celtics. Now, I will be the first to say that I had questions about Jason Tatum coming into this playoff run. I thought he relied too much on difficult shots at times. But I never doubted the kid's ability, and a lot of people doubt him to such a degree that it almost just brings down the Celtics. They'll be like, okay, well, time to close out a game. Are you really going to go to Jason Tatum? Like, yeah, that's perfectly fine. But I think it's just really a run of they thought they weren't challenged, and it's the cool thing to hate on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, too. So I think overall, when you got two stars that are as hated as they are, a lot of people are just gonna underrate him because it's gonna start to get into people's heads that hey, maybe these guys aren't as good as they say they are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The crazy thing was, they kind of rated up Tatum for a few years. Then the Warriors series happened. They started hating on Tatum. Then it's like they started clowning Brown for Game 7 against the Heat when Tatum got hurt. And, Jaylen Brown had a horrible game in terms of turnovers, which led to the whole no left hand stuff and all that. Then it's like, because they still wanted to hate on Tatum, they started elevating Brown, almost like sarcastically, where, they were giving him a bunch of praise that he obviously could have gotten way before now. But it's like now people were paying attention to him. So I do agree with you that it became like fashionable to hate on Tatum, talk about how he wasn't clutch and all this kind of stuff, even though he's had moments in playoffs series before. And yeah, they just looked at the East and was just like, yeah, it's not that great of an East, which that's mainly because they wanted the Knicks to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Like, let's be real. If the Knicks made the Eastern Conference Finals, it would be a whole different thing. Although if the Celtics beat them, they would have talked about their injuries as well. So the Celtics were in a no-win situation. They were kind of like that all year because they were running away with the East. Everybody was just trying to find who would be that second team in the East, who would be that third team in the East, who could give them a run in the playoffs, but they couldn't find anybody. So they had to basically go up against themselves until they could face the West, which was built up all year as the much stronger conference. So you got to give like Missoula and the coaching staff credit for keeping, I guess, the team focused amidst all of that. But now we're seeing that they've won like a whole 180, talking about how dominant this team was, how well built, how all the adjectives all the adulation like they want to throw at them now, and it's just like, it's the same team that's been there all year. So why praise them now if you didn't want to give them any credit before? But next question I would have is looking at, I guess, focusing on Tatum and Brown. What does this title do for those two? Whether it's as a duo, singularly, looking at like a top 10, top 15, top 20, like what do you think it does for the two of them that they now won their first championship?
I think they'll slowly keep climbing up the ranks of all-time duos. I think they have the potential to really jump into that top 10 duos of all time. They're that talented. It's a very talented team, but at a minimum, this just and probably the best thing that they love right now is just kind of shuts everybody up, right? Because the only talk has been you got to trade Brown, you got to trade Tatum. I even saw people firing up the trade machine after Jaylen Brown won Finals MVP. So I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? But for the most part, as it helps them ascend the ranks of best duos of all time, I think the best thing that it does for them right now is shuts people up because now they showed, hey, you can win a title building around us, so people can't throw that at them anymore.
Yeah, you took it like all time and historical. I was trying to look like smaller picture as just like in today's game because during the run, there was a lot of talk about, Brown not being all NBA. So you would think that means he's probably not a top 15 player. You're looking at Tatum, who was first team NBA, but a lot of people had him outside of like the top 5 for today's game. And I do think it probably does more for Brown's standing, especially with the All NBA snub. Now he's not only the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, he wins Finals MVP. So now a lot of those voters look really foolish not putting him on All NBA. Anthony, looks like you're starting a question there. I think you might have accidentally hit submit, but yeah. So I think for Brown, a lot of people saw a guy that I've seen since he was drafted out of Cal. Like, if there's a weakness in his game, he's going to try his best to fix it. And when they traded Marcus Smart, a lot of people were looking around to see who would be the next leader. Obviously, Jaylen Brown has kind of stepped up into that role along with Horford and Holiday, even though he was kind of new to the team. So we've seen his personality kind of change, and he's become more and more vocal. So I think he's probably going to be, they're probably going to try to make up for this year, putting him on All NBA next year, depending on obviously if his numbers are somewhat similar or increase a little bit more. But Tatum, I feel like the Tatum stuff may not necessarily go away altogether, because I still look at the people who will throw like Luka ahead of him, and Embiid ahead of him, SGA ahead of him. Like, just because he has a title, he still did more than those guys before the title. So I don't know if the title necessarily moves him ahead of some of those people. So he's probably still going to be kind of outside the top 5, depending on who you ask, obviously. But for Brown, I love it for him, for sure.
I think Tatum will probably stay around the same spot. I think it just kind of shuts everybody up about him for the time being. I don't think it actually moves him up higher or lower when it comes to ranking the best NBA players. Like, I do think the top 3 for that is still Jokic, Giannis, and when he's healthy and playing at the top of his game, Joel Embiid is hard to touch. And then when it comes, I think you can either argue Tatum's 4 or 5, depending on how you want to rate Luka. Personally, I have Luka at 4. But if you want to move Tatum over Luka, that's fine. But overall, I don't think this title really does much in that regard. But at least now people can't say you can't build a winner around Jason Tatum. It's obviously not true.
Yeah. All right, so Anthony's question was, do you think Boston's success was because of Drew Holiday? He was the X factor Boston needed. I'll let you go ahead and answer that one first.
Drew Holiday was a big part of Boston's success. I think that he was an X factor that Boston needed. I think there are, little things that you can kind of attribute Boston winning to, like Jason Tatum improving as a playmaker and just being more willing to make the right reads when necessary. Jaylen Brown really came into his own as a mid-range jump shooter. Kristaps Porzingis gave him a presence in the post that, Al Horford couldn't provide for them. But, Drew Holiday also, he's like an upgraded Marcus Smart. He can give you the same defense that Marcus did, and not to mention, he's much better offensively than Marcus Smart ever was. So I would say that there's a lot of different factors, but I would say that Drew Holiday was a big piece of the Boston Celtics puzzle this year.
Yeah, he definitely was a piece. I mean, in terms of the X factor, it's like you said, there's so many different factors that went into this. Like I said, the maturation of Tatum and Brown, the addition of Porzingis, the ability with Porzingis around to keep Al Horford much fresher for the playoffs. Derek White's emergence. Sam Hauser, I know he struggled at times, but his ability to knock down threes and be a more confident shooter definitely was a factor in all this as well. It's kind of like Brad Stevens, right? He was the coach. He moved to the front office. A lot of people didn't know what kind of front office exec he would be. From what we've seen, he's a guy that's not going to just sit on status quo with the team. If he sees a way to update it, make it better, no matter how big or small the move is, he's going to make that move. Because if you looked at the Porzingis move, like Porzingis was in Washington, nobody was paying attention to him. The last time people paid attention was him failing in Dallas with Luka. But he saw an opportunity to get him. He went and got him. Drew Holiday moves to Portland. We knew he wasn't going to stay in Portland. Like, Portland has zero interest in winning games. So obviously, what's going on, Jory? So obviously the Holiday part was going to be a buyout type of thing, or just try to get rid of him. And to be honest with you, there were teams I thought were going to get him way before the Celtics were going to get him. I assumed Miami was going to go after him, but for some reason Miami was good on him. So the Celtics stepped in and picked him up. obviously a key move. So it was just like a collection of small moves that led to them getting back to where they were against Golden State, and then those moves proving that with a little bit of tweaks and a little bit of substitutions here, that like you said earlier, Brett, Tatum and Brown can be your two best players on a championship team as long as you have the right people around them. And that's just what we saw in this. So yeah, Drew Holiday definitely gets a lot of credit, but he's not necessarily the X factor. He was just part of the overall puzzle piece that fit perfectly together. So I know Joel Embiid said the whole, well, the Bucks should get credit for the Celtics ring. I mean, that was just Joel Embiid. It was just Joel Embiid. Here's a tangent because me bringing that up does have to ask this question. ESPN, ABC, TNT with these random players that they were kind of rolling out there. We saw Josh Hart, we saw Julius Randle last night, Joel Embiid. I know TNT did what? Draymond and Chris Paul. We've seen CJ McCollum. We've seen all these other guys. The Joel Embiid stuff was just wild to me. Like, he's talking about the Celtics aren't a dynasty because the East was hurt, especially myself. And it's just like, well, when aren't you hurt? One. And two, the Boston team has beaten your team several times in the playoffs. So I don't know if necessarily you would stop them. But, it's neither here nor there. So, like, what do you think about Embiid's kind of analysis of the Celtics? Basically, that they're not necessarily a dynasty or anything like that because the East was so injured. Like, what do you think of that narrative?
I think it's pretty wild. First off, he's talking about himself beating the Celtics when he himself cannot beat the Boston Celtics even when healthy. We've seen that. The Boston Celtics employ a very swarm-heavy defense, and they force him to commit a lot of bad turnovers, and he struggles mightily against Boston. So I don't know why he thought. I think the only team, and I'm not going to sit here and try to play homerism here, but I think the only team that could have gave him a run for their money in a playoff series, I'm not even going to say we would guaranteed win, but I think it was the Bucks. Because we can say the Bucks had flaws, which they did, but at the same time, there's only a few teams that blew out the Celtics, and that was the Bucks twice. Was one of them. So I thought we had a chance, but once Giannis went down, wasn't even that amazingly confident of getting past Indiana. But yeah, I think when it comes to a dynasty in this day and age, that's tough. There's a lot of talent in the league. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more up and coming players, and I'm not even saying Boston can't repeat, but it almost feels like doing it now is even opposed to 10 years ago. That's going to be a tough challenge, but as long as this team stays healthy, I have no doubt that they can repeat and eventually become a dynasty.
Yeah, I know ESPN and all that we're talking earlier this morning about the definition of dynasty probably has to change in this version of the NBA, especially when you're looking at the new CBA rules, which I believe go into effect this offseason, that technically are supposed to make it so that teams like Boston aren't formed anymore, where you have really big name players all playing on the same team, even though, like I said earlier, Porzingis was chilling in Washington in obscurity. Drew Holiday was in Portland, and because of their circumstances, he was made available. So it's not necessarily a regular off-season or trade deadline that brought all these teams together. I mean, all these players together. But going forward, the Celtics have a 2-3 year, well, I think a 2-3 year window with this core group before, I guess, the second apron and all that might become issues, which maybe that's what starts to break up the team. But at least with that, you're going to have Tatum and Brown around for the next 5 years or so. And then the pieces around them will probably change. Now, Derek White, all indications are that Brad Stevens is going to re-sign him. I'd be interested to see what kind of numbers he necessarily brings in because of his versatility and everything like that. But I do want to talk about Dallas, because I don't want to make it just all about the Celtics. So looking at Dallas and how the series played out. So if you were to rewind back to before the series started, what is something that you thought Dallas would have been able to do against Boston that they ultimately couldn't, if there was anything? Or did you think that this went kind of the way you assumed it would?
Let me put it this way: I was cheering for the Mavericks because that's my second team, but at the same time, I picked Boston to win it in 6.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it just played out exactly like I thought the Celtics would want it to play out. What they understood too is the Celtics kind of torched the Timberwolves because they got a lot of corner threes and lobs. So the
Mm-hmm.
Celtics designed a perfect defense to take away corner threes and lobs. They forced guys like PJ Washington and Derek Jones Jr. to beat them with above the break threes. That is not their game. Put a lot of pressure on Luka, and then of course, Kyrie and Luka. I'll give him a lot of credit, at least offensively. Quite often, he did rise to the occasion. He had quite a few good games. Kyrie, the less said about his performance, the better. But no, overall, I think this series played out kind of how I thought it would. And I think, it just learning experience for Luka and the Mavs organization as a whole. It shined light on what they need to improve around him.
Yeah, I know for me, like I took Boston in 6, and I assumed that there would be one game where like Luka just goes crazy and has like a 40-45 point game. You're just like, well, nothing you could do that night. And then I thought that maybe Kyrie would have like some random game where he might do the same, and then they pull that out. But ultimately, I did think the Celtics were going to win this one. I mean, partly as a Celtics fan, but just looking at the matchups, it was just that I understood what Dallas did against Minnesota. I also think Minnesota played Dallas, giving them way too much respect because their defense, as good as it was so locked in on Luka and Kyrie that it just made it easier for them to be facilitators. Where Boston, yes, gave them the attention that they needed, but they did it with White, Holiday, Brown, Tatum, taking those guys one-on-one, being physical with them, trying to keep them out of their spots. That way they don't have those passing lanes to PJ Washington, who Anthony did put in the chat as shaking his head. It limited what he could do. It limited, Lively, Gafford, who liked to play around the rim. Green, I thought Green had a good series, but I don't think Jason Kidd was banking on that. So I think it went as kind of as well as I thought it would. Maybe the one thing that might have surprised me was how well they shut down Kyrie. Like, I know he has his issues in Boston, but there were a lot of times where he would have the ball in his hand and try to dribble around guys, and he just couldn't get around them. And this is a guy who has made his name off of his ball handling and ability to break down defenses. And like, he was struggling with like Horford on him on the perimeter. He would struggle against White, Holiday. Like, it didn't matter. They made it tough on him, and he had to take tough shots. So I think that was the one thing that did surprise me in this series, other than game 4, where he kind of went off. But that was just a game that was clearly just a throwaway game, even though the media had a frenzy with that result in game 4. But yeah, so I guess the next question for Dallas is, if you are running the operation, what is one thing that's at the top of your off-season list?
I think the answer to that's easy. I got to find consistent shooting around Luka, and I don't mean just like consistent corner 3 shooting. You need to find guys that can hit from all different places on the court, above the break, corner, wing threes. Like that was turned out to be their big flaw. Is Boston could just completely ignore PJ Washington and Derek Jones when they weren't in the corner, and it completely worked out just fine for them. So I think either Washington and Jones have to improve as wing shooters and just be able to kind of shoot from more places than just the corner, or they just got to go out and find that guy. But I think the big thing is they just got to get another consistent shooter in there to really keep the defense honest and not let them overload the lob.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that they could do. I mean, I look at the team and I kind of see how they could be successful. I just don't know if the current system that they run, whatever lack of system, as some may say, where it's Luka dribbling the air out of the ball, as people would say, taking the step back three. I feel like you're bailing out defenses when you do that on a consistent basis. I know he can hit them, but I feel like next year they have to look at ways to make it easier on Luka. Whether that is let Kyrie bring the ball up a little bit more, Luka working on playing off the ball, on the wing. He can post up certain matchups, like try to make it easier on yourself. Because I do think with the whole perimeter play from Luka on a nightly basis, he wore down in the fourth quarters in all these games. And that was because, Boston hunted him on defense, forced them to use energy there. They forced them to use energy offensively with their ability to fight over screens and all that. And by the fourth quarter, he was gassed. And in a lot of games, it'd be he was trying to play a backseat role and let, Kyrie take over or whoever. Those guys just couldn't do it for him. So the ball ended up back in his hand, and he had to try to make something happen. So I think the biggest thing for Jason Kidd, Jared Dudley, those guys on that staff is, sure, you could make a addition on the outside of those two, whatever, but make it easier on Luka. I feel like that's got to be their biggest thing.
And
Anthony says, what they all say, stop everybody else and let Luka cook. Yeah.
I gave Luka's credit, but at the same time, too, Luka's also got to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got to move better on the perimeter defensively. He can't. His defense works best when they have somebody like the Timberwolves. Okay, you can hide him on someone in the corner like Kyle Anderson. You can take your chance on that. When you can hide him and kind of let him play free safety and let him blow up passes and everything with his IQ and just high ball knowledge, cool. He looks awesome. If you post him up, he's a big body. That looks awesome. But when you go up against a team like the Boston Celtics who have 5 guys that can attack you, then you're kind of cooked. It didn't look great. And I gave him credit all year long. I think he did improve as a defender, but I still think there's room for even more improvement. But honestly, I will throw all that away if he would just get back on defense half the time.
Yeah.
I don't need him to half the time. You need to improve on defense. Cool. Half of it's effort. And when you're falling over after every jump shot and looking to the ref and complaining, guess what? Now the Celtics have a 5-on-4 advantage on the other end because you're on the ground complaining to the ref on something that clearly wasn't a foul.
Mm-hmm.
So do I think that Luke has to improve on defense? I do. But I think the even bigger maturity process here is he's just half the time just use your head. You're one of the smartest players I've seen, but half the time he just doesn't use it defensively. And he sits there trying to bait for so many fouls that it just comes to backfire. So just start using your high IQ for defense more and just get back.
Yeah, and the defense part is definitely a good point to bring up because this is where I want to give Joe Mazzulla a lot of credit. Because what Dallas actually started doing was sitting Lively or Gafford in the paint in front of the rim because they understood his defender was going to get by him. But you didn't want to give them a straight lane to the basket, so you had to have somebody there. And Mazzulla and the coaching staff started putting White, Holiday, and sometimes even Jaylen Brown in the dunker position, as they call it, right up there on the baseline. So once Tatum got into the lane, it was a very simple bounce pass to a guy who then had an easy layup at the rim. And I know Joe Mazzulla's been, discredited because of the predecessor who was there, Udoka, seen as a much better coach. In the way that he kind of left, a lot of people didn't necessarily like that. But Mazzulla had a very strong series with his timeout usage, with their adjustments offensively. We could even talk about defensively, the times where Jaylen Brown would go up to him and be like, I mean, we heard the audio like in Game 5 where Jaylen Brown was like, "I got Luka. Like if I'm on the bench, he's on the bench. When he goes in the game, I'm going into the game." And Mazzulla let him do that. And, he trusted him to be able to guard him 94, well, sometimes 94 feet, but, to do that on an island against a guy in Luka that's so offensively gifted, like Mazzulla deserves a lot of credit. Jory says Luka has improved on defense, but he's still a liability. Yeah, and the improvement on defense is he's actually trying somewhat now, as long as things are kind of going well. Because if he's frustrated with the refs, you see it defensively. He becomes an absolute cone on defense. He'll stand there, kind of put an arm out. You get by that, you're by him easily. So I do think that is something that's going to have to improve for Luka. Is that, and Tatum went through this too. A lot of people said Tatum complained a lot early in his career, and it's like slowly he's gotten better with it. I feel like Luka probably gets there with more seasoning as a veteran in the NBA, at least hopefully for Dallas' sake. I think the next question, because I saw at the end of the series, a lot of people were talking about how they see Luka raising a banner in Dallas. I know it's tough to predict the future and everything like that, but do you think like this current version of Luka, this version of Kyrie, and this team in the next 3-4 years, do you think they could win an NBA title?
No, I don't think they do. I think, like I said, I think there's just a lot of maturity that still has to happen in Luka, and if he matures enough to stop complaining at the refs, getting back on defense, and just being smarter on that end, along with some marginal improvements around the edges, Kyrie, showing up in the big moment there in the finals to help him out, which we've seen Kyrie do before. He just doesn't like facing Boston for some reason, but yeah, I think it's going to take some improvements on Luka. Kyrie's got to do better, and you get some marginal improvements around the edges. Yeah, it can happen, but as of right now, the current iteration of Dallas that I just saw, the current iteration of Luka I just saw, no, absolutely not. Kobe said that James Harden style of offense that isn't going to win you a title, and Luka really likes to play a James Harden style of offense, so something is going to have to give if he wants to win a ring.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I know like the discourse around Luka not too long ago was it's tough to build a team around him. I do think they're kind of on the right track with this year's version of it. But as I said earlier, making it easier on Luka offensively. Jory and you as well pointed out, defensively, Luka needs to get better. PJ Washington, like I said, I know Anthony brought up PJ Washington. I think PJ Washington can work with Luka. It's just don't give him the corner 3 treatment. Like use him on the block, use him as a slasher, use him differently. I feel like he'd be more valuable that way. And for Luka, I feel like this is probably going to be like the elephant in the room. How does he transform his body necessarily going forward? Because now that he understands what it takes to get to the finals, now he's got to do something to now win a finals. And whether that is, I don't know, better body construction, dropping weight, I don't know. But it kind of seems like that's what Luka kind of needs to do to get over the hump. Or do you think he can manage this and win a title?
I think Luka actually looked the best, and he wasn't the most polished, but if we're talking body wise and everything, if you look how he moved in the 2020 bubble, He moved
Mhm.
absolutely phenomenal, and that was him about 25 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
So I do think he should drop some weight to try to get some of that mobility and agility back, and he just moved a lot quicker, like 4 years ago. I get wanting to bulk up because it allows him to, bully a lot of guards and put him in jail and, creates advantages. But I do think he's got to find that perfect balance because now he's almost traded all of that, athleticism and speed that he did have 4 years ago into, being bigger and bulkier. So now he's pretty immobile on the perimeter. So I think he's got to maybe split the difference and find a way to find that balance where he's still big enough to back people down, but shed some of that weight so he can start hanging with some of these guards. Otherwise, you're going to see it keep happening. They're going to keep picking on him as deeper he runs into the playoffs because you'll know he'll wear down eventually.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So going to Anthony's other comment about like kind of stop everybody else and watch and let Luca cook. So looking at the West going into next season, who do you think will be best equipped to stop Dallas from getting back there? Because I'm sure there's teams in the West that looked at what Boston did to them and go, that's simple enough. We could easily do that with the personnel that we have. But like, who do you think actually has the personnel to employ the defense that the Celtics did in these finals?
The first team I thought of is the Denver Nuggets. They ran into the Timberwolves, who happened to put together the perfect defense to be able to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think the Denver Nuggets have a nice answer to what the Mavs want to do because they can have, Jokic kind of hover around in the middle. Aaron Gordon can, check Luca, and they got guys like KCP as well. Porter's big enough. Also KCP and Jamal Murray for Kyrie. So I think Denver could match up with them pretty well. And then it, gets tough after that, right? I think the Thunder will be able to. Obviously, got dispatched in 6 by Luca. However, I think another year of just roster construction. But I think most importantly with the Thunder, just another year of internal growth. And I think that team will be right back where they are. That team could very easily make the Western Conference Finals next year. I think those are probably the two teams that I think about who can match up with them the best. I want to say the Timberwolves could possibly do it,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think that it would just require them to kind of fiddle around with their roster a bit and just kind of be smarter from a tactical standpoint because watching them try to guard Luka in the pick and roll was just brutal, and
Yeah.
that was kind of their biggest flaw. They did everything that you could do wrong against Luka. They did it, and it was like intentional was the hard part to watch. So I do think that the Timberwolves will be back. OKC and Denver could all match up with them with slight tweaks and adjustments.
Yeah, I feel like those are probably the two teams. I think Minnesota has the perimeter defense to, with a proper game plan to probably frustrate the two of them. I do kind of wonder interior wise because Cat can kind of get lost defensively, and so yeah, I'd probably stick with the two teams that you said, and there's probably going to be a surprise team as well. But this is a question I had watching the end of the game last night and looking at Kyrie. I understand his struggles in Boston. That's something that he has to figure out because if they plan on making it back to the finals, they could very easily see a Celtics team again next season. But how do you think Kyrie's game is going to age? Because I mean, he's 32 now, and I've kind of wondered this because a lot of people have been asking, like, was this Kyrie's best chance at a title, since leaving LeBron? And it made me think with his struggles against this defense, like, how do you see his game aging over the next 3-4 years?
I think Kyrie's game will age actually just fine.
Okay.
I think this is a guy that he doesn't really rely on explosiveness. This is a guy that relies on jumpers. Well, he does rely on a lot of tough jumpers, but at the same time, like those will be there for him, and he normally still hits them at an efficient rate. Outside of the Boston series, he was doing just fine. And this is a guy too who I think as he ages, he'll have more problems getting to the rim, but at the same time, he's also one of the best finesse finishers we've seen in a while around the rim. So even a tough finish isn't an impossible finish for someone like Kyrie. So is it his best chance to, get a second championship? Maybe. This could be his last chance. But when it comes to how Kyrie's game is going to age over time, I think his game is going to age perfectly fine.
Yeah, I mean, I did think about that, but yeah, because Kyrie's ability to shoot mid-range jumpers and normally on the perimeter, he should be fine. I do think his getting straight to the hoop, he probably doesn't do that as well as he gets older, but yeah, he definitely has other talents to make up for that. All right, so getting back to the Celtics now. We saw the evolution of Jaylen Brown. We saw him win Finals MVP. Do you think that was the right decision? Because I know it seemed like early in the series it was absolutely Jaylen Brown. Then looking at games, I think 3 and then games 5, it seemed like Tatum had closed the gap, and some people thought Tatum could take it. So are you fine with Jaylen Brown winning MVP, or do you think Tatum should have gotten it?
I think you can go either way with that and be fine. Because let's be real with Jason Tatum, it seemed like he would get hot early, but then Jaylen Brown would finish the games very well for them. So they like balanced each other perfectly. You needed them both. Tatum for the strong start, Brown for the strong ending. So at the end of the day, I think that you could have gone either way and it wouldn't be a big deal. Jaylen Brown was more efficient than Tatum. He played elite defense. Tatum played elite defense, was a better rebounder, but shot slightly less efficient. Like, you can make a case for either side and you wouldn't be wrong. So I don't have a problem for Jaylen Brown for finals MVP.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean, I kind of predicted it was going to be Tatum because the night that he was having in the clinching game, I thought that was going to probably carry a bit of weight with like recency bias, maybe necessarily with the voters, because he had 31, 11 assists, and like 8 rebounds, a couple of steals. Like he was doing everything. And over the course of the actual series, yeah, Tatum averaged a little bit more points, rebounds, and assists. He led the team in all 3 categories. But I think what helped Jaylen Brown out a lot was his willingness to take on the Luka assignment and how effective he was. I feel like that pushed him over the edge with the voters. I think the vote was 7-4 for Jaylen Brown. And Tatum, you got to give him credit as well because he took on like Gafford and Lively in a lot of lineups in the paint as basically your 5 defender and held his own, which helped out the team a lot. But yeah, I think Brown's tenacity with Luka and kind of some of the shots that he hit where it was to like slow down the momentum of Dallas or, drives to the rim with the big dunk. And I think in game 3, which kind of changed the momentum on that. I feel like moments wise, I think that's probably why Jaylen Brown got the MVP. But yeah, I would have been fine either way. I just predicted Tatum because I thought with his numbers being slightly better, I feel like the voters might have gone his way. But I also think that maybe some of the voters are trying to, make amends for not putting Jaylen Brown on All NBA as to why they may have went with him for Finals MVP.
I mean, I don't think it's the most egregious thing to say that Jaylen Brown wasn't All NBA. I think if you say he wasn't top 20, that would be egregious. I do think he was a top 20 best player in basketball, but that would be weird to me because if you say Jaylen Brown wasn't a top 15 player, I don't think it's the most egregious take of all time. So I don't know. I don't know why you'd swing your vote that hard over a take like that, but yeah, I didn't have an issue with it.
We know some of these voters. Who knows why? Because look, when I saw All NBA, the 2 names that popped out at me, especially with Jaylen Brown being technically the 16th player, he was the first one not to make it was probably Halliburton and Booker. And Booker was probably mainly because, as big of a circus as Phoenix was, them getting two guys on All NBA, maybe. And then for Halliburton, I don't know. Like Halliburton is interesting in that, like when he's right, he plays really well. But I thought at times, especially once he came back from the injury, I didn't think he played up to par as he did before the injuries. And I thought maybe that would have been able to get Jaylen Brown on there. But I mean, All NBA is All NBA. It's subjective because there's not like clear cut qualifications that are outside of the 65 game limit. So what one voter sees, another one may not see, and it just ended up the way that it did. But yeah, so next question would be, I think going back to Joe Mazzulla and then looking at Jason Kidd, do you think Joe Mazzulla wildly outperformed Jason Kidd? Yeah, we'll just leave it at that. I don't want to put any qualifiers because I don't want to maybe sway your answer any way or the other. Do you think Joe Mazzulla wildly outcoached?
I think Joe
Jason Kidd?
Mazzulla always wildly outrules Jason Kidd. I think Joe Mazzulla has just been a much better coach than Jason Kidd. Joe Mazzulla, what he did in his rookie year was absolutely incredible. Like that man came in and was already coaching at a high level that we've seen coaches coach for 10 years and not be able to coach at the level that Joe Mazzulla did in year one. So I think that Joe Mazzulla wildly outcoached him, and I think that just reflects on the reality that Joe Mazzulla is just a better coach than Jason Kidd. I'll give Kidd credit. He's improved indefinitely since Brooklyn and Milwaukee, but he's not Joe Mazzulla level of a coach.
I mean, yeah, I agree with that. I think the one thing that I will, I guess, throw at Jason Kidd to not necessarily make an excuse for him, but to help him out is that Mazzulla had a clear cut rotation. Like he knew what guys he was going to play, what he was going to get from them. It seemed like for Jason Kidd, he was throwing darts and hoping something sticks because the amount of minutes that Hardaway got and did nothing with, I guess the most you could say is why would you play in those many minutes? But then you're looking at Kleber and his inability to score. Hardy was, I think, okay, but he had moments where he looked like he didn't belong on the floor. Dante Exum. Like, name your favorite Dante Exum play from the series. Like, I don't know. It almost got to the point where I didn't know what Jason Kidd was supposed to do with some of these guys that were on the team. But I do agree, Mazzulla was clearly the better coach, and as I started with, like, hopefully he gets the flowers that he definitely deserves.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I think if you flip teams with both coaches, I think Jason Kidd would have, won the finals with the Celtics too. However, I think Joe Mazzulla would have pushed the better buttons, and I think he would have just been able to make it work much better. And that's kind of where I'm at. I just think that Joe Mazzulla gives me the vibes that, and obviously this isn't something that we can prove yet because he's always had a really talented team, but Joe Mazzulla seems he's a really good motivator, and I have no doubt that he could do more with less than a lot of other coaches.
That's a good point. Like, we've heard Tatum Brown and other guys talk about him. Like, he shows them UFC fights to motivate them. He does jujitsu on his own. Like, he's a very intense guy. And I think for media people, that kind of rubs them the wrong way because he can be kind of short in terms of certain questions. But I think for the group that he has in Boston, he's the voice that they listen to, and you could probably say that they need at this point. So yeah, I definitely swing it towards him. I mean, Jason Kidd, it's still hard to think of Jason Kidd as a coach and not remember his time in Brooklyn with the whole like standing on the sideline and somebody running into him like that moment in like YouTube lore just lingers with me because that was just such a weird thing to see for a head coach that I guess Jason Kidd is slowly kind of getting away from that, but it's still hard for me to think of him not as that guy.
If people want to know how far Jason Kidd has improved as a coach, let me tell you the story of something that legitimately happened in Milwaukee.
Mm-hmm.
Bucks are up 3. Chris Middleton has a free throw left. There's 0.3 of a second left on the clock. Chris Middleton hits the free throw. Inbound, game over. Jason Kidd got mad at him because he's like, well, what if they inbound it and then they get a 4-point play and cash a 90 footer in 0.3 of a second? Or like, what are you talking about? Like, that was a story that broke that he was getting mad at like Chris Middleton, and this happened multiple times where he'd get mad. If you're up 3, it's like a second to go. If you hit the free throw, because they're like, well, what if they get the 4-point play? It was like, what? Who's going to be in the vicinity to foul the shooter to give them a 4-point play in that situation? So, if you want to know how far Jason Kidd has gone as a coach, like in Milwaukee, he may have been like one of the dumbest guys that I've seen, like on a coaching staff at times, to where he is now. It is truly incredible. So, I'll give Jason Kidd all the flowers because he has definitely grown from Brooklyn and Milwaukee to now.
Yeah, I mean, he just needed some, I guess, experience. I'm happy for him. It seems like he's found a place in Dallas. I think they re-signed him.
Yeah.
During the playoffs. So yeah, he seems like he's going to be a fixture there. We'll see if he can lead them back next year. But looking at, I had another question I was going to ask. Al Horford. Got to talk about Al because yeah, Tatum did his thing. Browns Finals MVP.
We know they all got carried by Big Al.
Yeah, this was clearly the banner 18 run for Al Horford. Like looking at Al Horford and how he's kind of come from Atlanta, his stop in Philly, his stop with the Thunder, where he was basically just told to kind of go home until we move you somewhere else. Was it 2 stints in Boston? Like, when you think of Al Horford's career, I'm not saying it's over necessarily, but I do think there's some reports that he could kind of retire at this point now that he has his ring. How would you describe like Al Horford's career?
Underrated, underappreciated. This is a guy that he's just a winner wherever he goes, right? Like, we're looking at a guy who he went back to back at Florida with Jakeem Noah. Sorry, Florida or Florida State. Can't remember which one off the top of my head. Then he
you're right, Florida.
I was right. Okay, I thought it was Florida, but I get the Florida and Florida State mixed up quite frequently.
Right.
But yeah, then he goes to Atlanta, and with him on that Atlanta team, they improve immensely. The only team that didn't really improve with him is like Philly, but that was just an awkward fit to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, this dude just does everything that your stars don't want to, and you need players that are willing to get down and do the dirty work. So I think this guy is an underappreciated, he's an underrated player, and I think there's a real chance that at the end of the day, you're going to be calling Al Horford Mr. Hall of Famer.
Yeah, well, if you look at not the NBA Hall of Fame, the Basketball Hall of Fame, they do take into account college. He won back-to-back titles at Florida. That has to slanted towards him being a Hall of Famer and now being an NBA champion. I would find it hard to keep him out of the Hall of Fame. And that would be perfect for him because, like you said, he was just a guy that whatever role you kind of need him for, he can fill. In Atlanta, like first coming out of Florida, he was a post up, back to the basket kind of guy. That turned into kind of like a face up game. then like a mid-range game, and now he's to the point where he's a legit 3-point threat. He runs pick and pop. He can run pick and roll. He's just a smart, heady player while being a great leader for, a young duo. Because, yes, Tatum is still 26. Brown is 27. So those guys in their first year of being elevated to like a leadership role, they relied on Al Horford to kind of show them, because I think Tatum said like Al Horford's his favorite teammate because Al Horford showed him how to be a pro. And that carries a lot of weight when now you're looking at, Tatum and Brown are going to be there post Al Horford, and they're going to transition into like the loudest voice in the room. So if you had a guy like Al Horford to model after, you kind of feel better about their chances going forward. But yeah, so I think Horford should be a Hall of Famer. That means his dad's going to be there, who like his biggest fan. Whenever Al Horford does anything, the camera automatically finds his dad, and his dad's just cheering like crazy for him.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that.
And the thing with Al Horford is the Hall of Fame is like his career as a Sunday, and it's the cherry on top. So do you think Al Horford's a Hall of Famer because he won a ring as a 38-year-old role player? No. But to me, it could be what pushes him over the edge in a lot of people's minds. A lot of people, for better or worse, like overvalue rings at times when it comes to a player's career. So in the eyes of a lot of these Hall of Fame writers, that could very well be the thing that pushes him over the edge. And I'm hoping it does. I'm hoping Big Al gets in there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, part of me does kind of think he may come back one more year, try to go for the back-to-back, which would be crazy if he does back-to-back Florida, and then tail end of his career, a back-to-back in Boston. That would be literally going full circle. So obviously we'll see once I think they're like partying and they're celebrating in Miami. That obviously going to have to go back to Boston for the parade, which I don't know if they announced that yet. I'm assuming it's probably going to be Thursday, maybe Friday. I don't know. Then after that, we'll kind of see what he decides to do.
You going to the parade?
No.
No?
I mean, I'm in Atlanta. If I was in Boston, I'd probably go.
Didn't know if you were making the trip up there.
Nah, I'll watch it. I'm sure I'll find it somewhere. I mean, I get the appeal of parades and stuff. Like, even though I was in Boston, I think I went to maybe one parade. I'm trying to think which one. I think it was one of the Patriots ones. Because I was literally like working down where the parade route was. So all I had to do was like go outside the building. And I was like, oh, here we go. But it's not like something I stay there all day or anything to do. So parades are like they're fun for the city. Trust me, I celebrate them like crazy, but necessarily going to them, I can pass on that. It's not that big of a deal.
It's fair. I'll be enjoying my Packers Super Bowl parade next year.
Right. Hey, it could happen. Who knows? It could very well happen. I think that's all I got. Oh, I did have another one. Because they were talking the like 180 that's going on TV is just hilarious to me. Because now like the Celtics went from not able to win it all, and they're already trying to spin the dynasty role on them, which I think we talked about a little bit earlier. But in a league that parity is paramount, how should we define dynasties? Because obviously we're probably not going to get, like the Jordan 6 and 8 years. We're probably not going to get that. We're definitely not going to get the Bill Russell like 11 in a row. So is just the dynasty this era, like maybe a couple of rings, couple of conference finals and all that? Like how do we determine dynasties now?
couple, 2, 3 rings and just consistent levels of success. I mean, let me put it this way: the Spurs are considered a dynasty, and they won 5 rings over the span of what was it, 14 years or something
Yeah,
like that,
that
15.
yeah.
So their rings are really spread out. I think the big thing is just obviously make sure you win a couple rings at some point, but just maintain this really high level of success they have going on. Like, and I think the Celtics are just like 1 or 2 rings away here from being considered a dynasty because they already have like what 6 conference finals in a row, or maybe not in a row, but they already have like 6 conference finals in 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they're halfway there. If they capture another ring or two, yeah, people are going to really start saying, "Yep, this is another Celtics dynasty, second or third greatest one we've seen."
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Um, okay, so another thing I wanted to address was a lot of fans looking at this final series and kind of the Celtics run as being boring. Looking at everything they accomplished, grand scheme of things, is this a team that's going to be remembered 5 to 10 years from now? And we're not counting like any additional rings, but just this 2023, 2024 version of them, going 80 and 21 over the yeah, 80 and 21 in terms of the regular season and the playoffs. Will they be remembered?
Should they be?
10 years down the
Absolutely.
line? Yeah.
Yeah, should they be? Absolutely. Do I think they will be? Maybe. And it's tough to say because on one hand, record-wise and everything, they absolutely should be remembered. On the flip side, a lot of people are probably just going to write this off as, oh, the entire East was injured, yada, 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 and use every excuse in the book, and then just kind of throw them off to the side. So, do I think the Celtics team should be remembered fondly? Absolutely. They came in, they were quote unquote boring, and did what they had to do. Well, guess what? Most dynasties are boring.
Right.
Consistent, sustained success is kind of boring after a while, right? Like, name me which San Antonio Spurs team was exciting. Like 2014, maybe? And that is if you're a fan of ball movement. Like, is Kobe and Shaq always the most exciting thing? Not always. A lot of it was Shaq just getting to the foul line 15 times, and the Lakers are getting there another 15 because Shaq has just put everybody in the bonus. So that's the thing with the Celtics is now a lot of people don't understand this is dynasties half the time are boring. Success half the time is boring.
Mm-hmm.
But all that matters is can you get the job done? And this year the Celtics quote unquote bored us all the way to the finals. But at the end of the day, all that matters is they took care of what they were supposed to and they got the job done.
Yeah. I do. Well, now that you brought up like Shaq and Kobe, what probably helped is like their off the court drama kept them relevant, kept them in the news. A lot of the stuff around Tatum Brown is that they're not the most exciting in terms of their game. Even though Jaylen Brown has had loud dunks, and I will tell you, like if you look up like Jaylen Brown dunk highlight videos on YouTube, like he's had some impressive dunks in game. But they're two guys that when they're not playing on the court, you don't hear a lot about them off the court. No issues or anything like that. Like Tatum obviously has Deuce, where that's where a lot of his attention goes, and like social media wise, it's usually like them hanging out. And maybe that's what's gonna make them continue to be viewed as boring, is that these are just two guys that play basketball and just live life. Just being mature adults, I guess.
And
And apparently it's boring now.
And that's one thing that'll always bother me about like new age sports analysts. It seems they're more interested in the off court drama and
Yep.
they're more interested in the story than the actual game that's going on the court. Like we've seen it, right? Instead of talking about like during the finals, instead of talking about how awesome the Celtics were as a team, we're having 10-minute segments on LeBron unfollowing Big Perk on ESPN. or we're talking about Luca and Kyrie and anything about them that just has nothing to do with basketball. So to me, it frustrates me a lot because I just love watching and talking about good basketball. I love talking basketball. It just seems there's a lot of guys out there now that they don't necessarily care about that. They just need to be the first to get the scoop. They have to be unique. They have to throw out a hot take because maybe 5 years down the road it'll be right, and then they can screenshot it and be like, "Oh, see, I was right." So
Yeah.
yeah, that's one thing that'll always drive me up a wall. It's people aren't going to get the respect that they deserve, like Tatum and Brown, because they're family people and want to spend time with their kids. Or Jalen Brown, he's a very smart guy who knows multiple languages. Someone like Jalen Brown would rather keep learning than getting involved in like drama. Come on, that should not take away from anything that they've succeeded with.
Yeah, like I've been fascinated by Jalen Brown. Like he is like a really intelligent guy. Like he's like a chess champion. I think coming out of college, he could have been working at NASA. He's like one of the youngest speakers to ever speak at Harvard. He's one of the younger members of the Players Association. He's, you know, fighting social injustice. Like this guy is just really tapped into what matters priority wise. And while, oh yeah, being a basketball player, improving each and every year, like he has interest outside of basketball. Because I think when I was looking it up as well, teams were kind of scared by that, by the fact that he had so many interests, that they were worried that he was going to actually love the game of basketball. Well, I mean, we're seeing now that he's a guy that is pretty locked in, and that's what kind of why he's one of my. I mean, he's probably my favorite Celtic right now. Grand scheme of things, I don't know because I was a big Paul Pierce fan, and even Reggie Lewis back in the day, which I still can't believe what happened with him. Garnett, the minute Garnett put on that number 5, because I was always a fan of his in Minnesota, like he jumped up there for me. So it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see like his path going forward, because I do think he's getting a lot of attention right now for what he accomplished this year. And how does that benefit him going forward? I don't know. We'll see. But at least now we don't get the Tatum and Brown don't like each other anymore. At least we don't get that. And I'm so glad that that's over.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad the Celtics won this title because the narratives, if they lost it, would have been so insufferable that I would have absolutely hated every moment of the offseason.
Yes, absolutely. I'm right there with you. It would have been brutal. Every day leading off would have been 40 minutes of why do these guys think so much in the playoffs? Why does Joe Mazzulla have a job? Why doesn't Brad Stevens come out of the front office and coach again? And then, I don't need that.
Then Big Perk. Oh, this wouldn't have happened if I was there. I Perk.
Right.
I Perk.
Right. Perk probably would have been like, I'm going to be the next coach. I'll get them to play right. And it's like, no, you can stay on ESPN. Could you imagine Perk as a coach? Like,
I feel like they would fire him mid-season.
Probably.
That team would go like 10-32, and he'd get canned halfway through. Unless he's somewhere like Detroit, where Monty Williams and guys like that just randomly catch super long breaks. But
yeah. I mean, have you seen the video with Perk where he was showing off his shooting touch from the perimeter?
No.
So I don't know, I can't remember who the guy was, but like showed up some court, Perk's there dribbling and whatever. He's like challenging Perk to hit jumpers, and Perk's out there like draining threes. And first thing that came to my mind, and a lot of people in the comments were like, how long did it take for him to film these makes? And if he had that in his bag, like how come we never saw it? I saw him take maybe 2 jump shots in Boston his time that he was there. I mean, it's kind of a slow jumper, but he was making them, at least in the video, the short.
I mean, on an empty court, most NBA players are going to hit their open jumpers. Like, did he have it in the bag? No. His jumper was insanely slow. He's not getting it off over any defender unless they're completely ignoring him. And he clearly didn't have the confidence to shoot him in game anyway because he never
Right.
did. So it's so weird when people try to challenge NBA players to do something like, oh, bet you can't hit a jumper. Like, it's an empty court. There's no other professionals on the court. Like, of course they're going to start knocking him down. Ben Simmons looks like an absolute goat in the offseason, and in game he can't shoot anywhere outside of like 1 feet.
Right. And that's if he's, got the desire to take that shot.
Yeah, that's if Trae Young, the rim protector, isn't in the lane.
That moment, he'll never live that down.
No,
I don't think he cares, but yeah, he'll never live that down. I mean, that's why, like, I know Scalabrine had videos out there of like high school kids challenging him to one-on-one, and he's like destroying them because like his famous quote is like, "Yeah, I wasn't an all-star or a superstar, but I'm closer to Michael Jordan than you are to me." And like you think about that, and it's like, yeah,
right.
like Scalabrine was just a random guy in the NBA, but like he had legit skill. It's just that teams he was on, he was just asked to be just the guy.
Right. And
some guy at LA Fitness, like he's a legit NBA player.
Right. I think he 11-0'd all of them. And even like you see like in these pro-am runs, like Marjon Beauchamp, who can't get any minutes in Milwaukee, went into a pro-am last year and dropped like I think it was 70 or 80 in a pro-am. So
yeah.
I don't think people understand how like truly massive the talent gap is, even from D1 to pro, or even like G League to pro. Like there's a massive talent gap for a lot of these, and I don't think a lot of people understand that until you see the videos of Average Joe taking on Brian Scalabrine and just getting absolutely 11-0'd.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun. Those videos are kind of fun. I mean, unless like you have anything else finals wise, I mean, we can get into fun trivia and then kind of get out of here.
I was actually going to ask you one non-NBA question because I feel like I didn't hear your opinion on this. 5 years, $275 million. Is that too much for T-Law, or do you think he grows into that?
Look, every time I see a quarterback sign, I automatically think, where does it end? Because if you're going to look at Trevor Lawrence's career so far, he came in, can't miss guy out of Clemson, rookie season, okay. I think second season dipped, third season started promising, but the way Trevor Lawrence ended last season, I don't know if he's going to live up to the contract. Because if you're going to be the highest paid quarterback in the league, Jacksonville better win the division next year. They better be a playoff team. And I mean, in terms of winning a playoff game or not, you better be competitive. I guess depending on who they match up against, that's neither here nor there. And if I'm looking at Jacksonville right now, I don't think it's a guarantee they make the playoffs. I would put Houston ahead of them. I think Tennessee has an opportunity to pass them. The Colts, they're probably better than the Colts. I don't know about Anthony Richardson, but if he's going to be your highest paid quarterback and their team's going to be third best in a division that a lot of people don't necessarily think is the strongest, although I think, like I said, I think it's going to be much stronger next year, that doesn't seem like a smart way to spend your money. And it's not like he doesn't have talent around him. Travis Etienne, good running back. He had Calvin Ridley. He got out of Christian Kirk what Kyler Murray in Arizona couldn't get out of him. I mean, yes, you could look offensive line's shaky, defense, whatever. We've been told Doug Peterson's really good with quarterbacks. There's other young quarterbacks that are in worse situations necessarily that I don't know that Trevor Lawrence has like wildly outperformed them to the point that he deserves to be the highest paid quarterback. I think 5 years down the line, I think people are calling him overrated and maybe laughing at Jacksonville for giving him what they did.
That's fair. I think it'll be tough. I think they made some good moves this offseason. I will give them that. I think one of their big issues offensively when it comes to receivers is I don't think they had any X receivers, right? Somebody to go out there, throw them out wide, and really handle the physicality that comes with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Calvin Ridley was good in Atlanta, but I think a big part of that because they had Julio Jones to be that guy that can go out there, handle the physicality, and truly be that X receiver. I think a guy that like Calvin Ridley is better when you can motion him and get him free releases. So I think drafting Brian Thomas.
Yeah.
And who was the other side? Gabe Davis. I think getting Thomas and Davis does help them a lot because I think they can handle that role, better than Calvin Ridley. But I do think that, yeah, Trevor Lawrence, he's going to have to really show us something this year. Otherwise, that contract is going to look really bad really quick.
Right. And the defenses in that division alone, like you're talking about Houston, that in the blink of an eye turned that whole situation around where now you're dealing with Will Anderson and those guys twice a season. I think Tennessee's defense twice a season. And like the Colts played pretty well defensively. I just don't I don't know. I'd probably have to like look at their schedule next year to really see like how successful of a season are they really going to have. Actually, I'm gonna pull that up right now because I do wonder, because obviously being highest paid brings on certain pressure, and with fans, like with fans and everything, if they start off slow, you'll probably hear boo birds. They brought in Mac Jones. You'll probably hear people calling for Mac Jones. Like, I just don't know. I don't know with Jacksonville. I mean, they obviously had to do it because what's their alternative?
Mac Jones.
Jones. I mean, if you told fans right now, like, we're not going to pay Trevor Lawrence, we'll have him walk because we think Mac Jones could be our quarterback of the future, and for not necessarily reasons solely on his doing, that doesn't excite your fan base. Now, if Mac Jones comes in a backup role and shows you something and overtakes him, then you can be like, okay, whatever. But they're kind of backed into the corner that they had to pay Trevor Lawrence. It wouldn't have been smart for them to just let him walk.
And now they're just kind of stuck with him because even if Mac Jones does like come in, if he gets hurt or something and outperforms him,
you can't have that money sit on the bench.
Right. And it's not like you're going to find many trade finders who are be like, oh, yeah, we want to take on the highest paid quarterback in the league who just got outperformed by Mac Jones.
Exactly. So looking at their schedule, it's like, okay, so at the Dolphins, then it's home for the Browns, at the Bills, at the Texans, home for the Colts, at the Bears. They got the Patriots in London. They have your Packers, at the Eagles and the Vikings, Lions, Texans, Titans, Jets, Raiders, Titans, Colts. I mean, I think there's some games in there that could go either way. I mean, that could be like a 8-9 type of schedule for all we know.
It's funny. Speaking of the Dolphins and Jets, I heard those two teams, and I'm like, oh man, that reminds me on TikTok. I threw out a kind of hot take there that I kind of got flamed a little bit for it because I was asked which quarterback would I rather have for next year or on a filter, and it was Tua and Aaron Rodgers, and I said, you know what, give me Aaron. I'll take Rodgers over Tua next year.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the most insane take that you've ever heard? What do you think?
No, I hear crazier things on a daily basis on TikTok. I mean, actually, right before we came on here, that Barstool group was doing the whole, don't speak until a better player pops up than whoever. They had one. Who was it? Was it better than Eli Manning? Which I was like, we're going down this road again. Like they passed on Cam Newton, they passed on Phillip Rivers, they passed on all these guys. One guy, Kurt Warner, pops up. He's like, yeah, Kurt Warner easily. The other two guys are like, no. Like, didn't Eli take Kurt Warner's job in New York? And they're like, yeah, because Kurt Warner was struggling at that point, and Eli took over. They're like, there you go, Eli's better. I was just like, what are we talking about here? Then they did another one that was NBA related. It was pick a player that's better than Jaylen Brown. They passed on SGA. They passed on a couple of others. Jalen Brunson comes up. They go, oh, yeah, obviously. And I'm like, yeah, the wild takes that come from Barstool Sports are the wildest I've heard. So, what you just said is nowhere near levels of that they put out on a daily basis.
What you just kind of said, because I know their logic, right? Because I made a video on a repost of one of them to the Barstool Sports. It was named a quarterback better than Aaron Rodgers, and they said, "Oh, Eli Manning, easily."
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't let that slide because it's just so stupid. So I made a video on it, and I get, well, Eli has 2 rings. I was like, so rings is the end all be all on who's the better quarterback? Like, I don't think that's a rabbit hole any of us want to climb, right? Because then it's like, okay, well, if that's the case, then we're looking at Aaron Rodgers is same talent level as Brad Johnson.
Yeah.
Dilfer's better than Marino. So that's why I said earlier, rings are getting overrated. And what I mean by that, just to clarify, is when people use rings as their entire argument for why a player is better, I think they should be included when arguing players. Don't get me wrong, but they're a piece of the puzzle. They're not the whole puzzle. Because especially in a game like football, you're not single-handedly winning a ring. You can argue that the defense, if anything, more so won that ring for the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
Because Eli and that offense were really mediocre all game. They couldn't get anything going until, David Tyree and Mario Manningham just made miracle catches in the end. But it was the defense that really stepped up when they needed them to and kept that game close for them. But, yeah, if anybody wants to know my stance on rings, I think they're getting overrated because people are starting to use them as the whole argument, and that's just lazy, and I absolutely hate it.
Yeah, I absolutely definitely agree with that one. Yeah, the whole comparison stuff, it has to be more than rings because there's intangibles, there's actual skill level when you watch the two players. Like you said, also football, especially when you're comparing 2 quarterbacks, there's a whole other side of the ball. There's special teams that those quarterbacks have zero effect on that can affect winning. So there has to be more to an argument than just rings. I definitely agree with that.
Anthony, we're 100% correct.
So the kicker got 3 rings. Is he the best kicker?
Harrison Butker is already on his way to GOAT status.
Yeah, but even with kickers, it's like the pressure on certain kicks because, it's Butker. A lot of people look at Justin Tucker as a really good kicker. You had Vinatieri with all of his clutch kicks. So even in that case, it's like, yeah, the rings are there, but the pressure kicks definitely help kicker resumes. But, yeah, kicker's a little bit different. All right, so for the fun trivia, like I said, since it's just you, we're going to go ahead and do a immaculate grid.
Ooh, okay.
So I think for this one, tell me if you can see that. Well, let me zoom in a little bit.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be tough, ain't it? Okay.
Let's see. So the note: players must have played in a regular season or playoff game for that team to qualify. So those of you who may not be watching necessarily, and also, I mean, we do this. Those of you in the chat, if you do have guesses, you can throw them out as well. So up the left side, we've got the Mavericks, Cavs, the Sixers. Along the top, we have the Magic, Nuggets, and a player born outside the U.S., 50 states, and Washington, D.C. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's see. Let's start easy. 76ers Magic. Tobias Harris played for both teams.
And I'm sure Sixers fans would love for him to go back. Tobias Harris. Okay. 12%. It's not a bad start.
Born outside the U.S., 76ers once had Dikembe Mutombo play for him. Oh, why this ad?
76. Oh, Mutombo. Okay. Mount Mutombo. Okay, 7%. Not bad, not bad.
Yeah, AI did play for both Philly and Denver.
Philly and Denver. All right. I mean, you going AI?
Yeah, AI.
All right. All right. There we go. All right. So you got the Sixers row done. Where are you going now?
Obviously, born outside U.S. and 50 states for like Dallas. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else because the obvious answer to that is Dirk.
Right.
But I always forget that there's like the percentages. I always aim for the low. Try to go for low ones. Orlando, Dallas, and why do I think that Jameer Nelson played for both Dallas and Orlando? Was it Jameer?
Nelson. I mean, now that you say his name, I feel like he did, but I don't know.
Let's see, Cavs. I think Anderson Varejao was born outside of the U.S.
All right. Yeah, I believe he's born in Brazil.
Let's see. Cavs and Nuggets. That's shouldn't be. Yeah, it's tough. I keep looking at like Cavs and Magic, like I know somebody that I. Cleveland, J.R. Smith, or Andre Miller. He was Andre Miller. I feel like he's a lot less known than J.R. Smith.
All right. Andre Miller. Yeah, 8%.
Oh, DeAndre Jordan for Mavs Nuggets.
Okay.
Cavs Magic. Shaq. Duh, that's the guy I was thinking of. It's Shaq.
Like sometimes the biggest name gets you a low percentage because everyone's like, oh, everybody's going to say that. Well, let's see. Okay, 73%. Yeah.
Yeah, not. I think my grid, if I'm going for percentages, cooked. But I'm trying to think of the Magic and Denver because obviously I can always just go Dirk for that outside the U.S. I'm not worried about that one. But this,
like, I have a random name for that one. And I'm trying to think if he played for both of them. So I mean, you could use it if you want. For some reason, I think Daryl Armstrong played for Orlando and Dallas.
I think. Yeah, let's go Daryl Armstrong. Let's try it. I think you're right.
Daryl Armstrong, yeah.
There it
Okay.
is.
All right.
And then, of course, I think we just
born outside the U.S.
Let's just go with Dirk. Let's just get the immaculate grid.
All right. All right.
Rarity score 233. Yeah.
Let's see. I do like that they added this where you can like go through and try to name all the possibles. I mean, we're not going to do that. That would take forever. Most popular. Vince Carter,
Big G,
Deandre Jordan, Dirk Nowitzki, Shaq, JR, Big Z, Joel Embiid, Iris, Markelle Fultz. Okay. Let's see the rare one. Okay, accuracy. So the one that stumped everybody was Dallas and Denver. Interesting. I thought it showed you like the rare ones. Where is that at?
Maybe it's on the player, the show for possible answers.
Oh, I think that goes somewhere else. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it showed you the rare answers.
It literally just takes you to stat head. Pretty interesting.
Frank
a lot of names you could have used. I was thinking of like Mbamute. Did he actually play for them?
That was my other guy, JJ Barea. I thought about him, but I was like, I'm just going to keep it safe because I wanted to keep my immaculate grid.
Yeah. No. You had Kyrie, because Kyrie was born Australia, I think.
Mm-hmm. See,
I used to tell you the rarest ones.
I'll say Hoop Grids is always a lot of fun. Also, I love doing both.
Or maybe I'm thinking of because Hoop Grids I know tells you.
Yeah.
I mean, we technically have time. We could do Hoop Grids.
Sure, why not? Let's just throw up a Hoop Grid, see what it is today. Round 2, you ready, Anthony?
They're going after my heart on this one.
I'll say that you should knock this out of the park, right?
I should, yes. Okay, so once again, those of you who may not be watching, it's definitely a Celtics theme because of the title, but they have Tatum, Brown, Drew Holiday on the left side, along the top, Celtics, then 2 assists per game in a season, 30 plus minutes per game season. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see.
Drew Holiday, Celtics teammate, Evan Turner. I feel like there's probably some lesser name guys like we. Not bad, under 3. Okay.
That's a good start.
Quetus, you know the guy I'm talking about, like your 3rd or 4th string center.
For which square? Yeah, for which square did you want?
No, we'll use him for the Tatum square.
All right. Yeah, there.
Nemus Queta. I just like merged both of his names. Apparently a lot of people know.
Okay.
Okay, let me try to think of I'm trying to think of like the end of the Celtics bench, like Jaden Springer. That's his
Okay.
name, right?
Yeah. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
0.5.
2 assists
Are
per
we
game.
are we naming ex-Boston players? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Tatum
2
came.
assists per game season. So it's not a high, like a crazy high number. You only have to think of point guards or anything. Like 2 assists, you can get that from a big man or something like that.
I'm gonna go a little off the grid here with Drew Holiday. I got some names I'm gonna throw out there, see if any of them hit.
Okay.
Because I'm thinking back to his Pelicans days, and the first name for some reason that came to mind naturally is Terrence Jones.
Oh, was that lefty at Kentucky?
Yeah, yeah. Help lead the legendary Rockets. Apparently, he just doesn't even. He's not even on the hoop grids.
Unless if I spelled it wrong, but yeah, he did not come up.
Whew. Okay. What other great teammates has he had? Omer Rosick. Oh, there he is. Sorry, I just saw him.
Oh, you did? Hold on.
Yeah, type in Jones again. I swear I just saw this guy. Maybe. There he is.
There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, it's ENC. Okay.
He
I'll say.
didn't. Okay, you know what? Screw it. Omer Rosick. Rockets legend. We're right in my wheelhouse of naming like the most random role players, so he didn't either? Come on. I think that's part of the issue is these
So
guys are
Anthony
too
Price has thrown out Derek White. Which I mean, you could use Derek White for a couple of these squares.
Okay, yeah. The easy answer is I know Drew Holiday played with Rondo and Boogie. But did Etuan Moore ever get 2 assists a game?
Etuan Moore. I get to do the.
It might just be easier.
There.
Oh, there we go.
He absolutely did. 1.7.
Yes.
Purdue legend, Etuan Moore.
Let's see. Jaylen Brown. I'm trying to think of. Obviously, played with Scary Terry.
Mm-hmm.
Kyrie. Those would be the obvious answers. Gordon Hayward would be another obvious answer. Marcus Morris? He played with Marcus Morris, right?
Okay.
I don't know how many people remember that.
Yes. He did. 1.3.
Jason Tatum. Okay. Al Horford. I don't think Luke Cornett ever got over 2 assists a game. I doubt it. There's no way. Trying to think of. Obviously Blake Griffin played for the team. Part of me feels like that's too obvious, but at the same time, like, who remembers Blake Griffin playing for the Celtics?
Yeah.
Although I feel like I want to say use him for the 30 minutes a game, if anything.
That.
Let's try.
Yeah.
Let's try Blake Griffin. Let's see where he's at.
The 2 assists.
Oh, we'll do 30 minutes.
All right. $3.9.
Oh, okay. I did not expect him to be that low, honestly. Okay, 2 assists per game. Let's see. Let's see. Obviously, I'm sure Rob Williams accidentally did it. I feel. See, that's the
Fantastic,
tough.
big man.
That's the tough part. Is half these names. I'm like, this might be obvious though. And try Rob Williams at 2 assists a game. Let's see if a lot of people put him there.
$3.7.
Not as many as I thought. Okay, 30 minutes per game. Teammate Jaylen Brown. Any washed up vets I can think of that joined him? See, there was obviously Hayward. We already used Blake Griffin. Trying to think of other. There's no way people don't have Kemba Walker as the answer here. Maybe? At this point, I'm not even sure because half the time I think an answer is obvious. Not a lot of people have it.
3.4.
Oh, okay. I did not expect that. Okay.
Anthony
Now,
says, Kyle, it's your team. I'm still lost. I mean, look,
now,
Brett is doing well. I will say I have a random name that once you finish it, that I will tell you.
Now, Drew Holiday. I think Omer did play 30 minutes a night for some reason. Let's try Omer Osik one more time. Maybe not, but
He did. 1.38. 21.23. You did better than about 71%. So the random name I had, which would have worked for 30 minutes a game with either one of these, Jordan Crawford.
I forgot about Jordan. I forgot he even existed, honestly. But okay, that would have been an awesome one.
That would have been an interesting number, but yeah, Jordan Crawford was a name that I was thinking about for 2 assists or 30 minutes.
I was like, I kind of cooked with the Pelicans ones because I've had way too many debates about like that mid 2010s Pelicans team that I want to admit. Because I've had too many people go try to tell me, well, if AD is so good, why didn't you win a title with the Pelicans? Like, because they were freaking terrible. Like, well, if they had Boogie, they had a super team. Okay. If you think the Pelicans had a super team, then I have no interest in talking basketball.
Exactly. All right. I mean, look, we were able to give you 2 forms of fun trivia. Brett killed both of them, so definitely a good place to end the episode. I mean, Brett, unless there's anything else you want to bring up before we get out of here?
No. Thanks for everybody that tuned in. Appreciate every single one of you.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say there was one quick thing because I know you're a big wrestling fan. I saw the Wyatt 6 reveal. Gotta say, well done. That was well done by WWE.
That was the inspiration of me wearing my Fiend shirt today, actually, was watching the Wyatt 6 reveal. But I 100% agree. I genuinely thought that at the end of the show, they were just going to beat up everybody in the ring. So them just ripping apart the whole backstage area and destroying everybody back there was not something I saw coming. It was absolutely well done, and I'm looking forward to what goes on next.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. But yeah, as Brett said, appreciate all of you in the comments. Especially Anthony helping out with the grids. We had Jory in here. Obviously, if you do tune in after the fact, greatly appreciate it. Make sure you go ahead and hit the like button, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff for Integrity Sports Network. This is the On the Ball podcast. Myself and Brett. We're on here every Tuesday at 7. So make sure you come back next week for another episode where we'll talk about, I don't know, we'll see. NBA's done, but the off season will be going on. We'll have maybe some Olympic buildup. I don't know. We'll definitely have something for you next week. So make sure you tune in. So we'll let you enjoy the rest of your night. So go ahead and do so. Be safe. And we'll see you next week. We are out of here. Good night.